Imagine standing on the bank of a river.
Oh, that's a great visual to start with.
Right. Like the water is rushing past, it's catching the morning light, and it just feels like you are looking at something completely wild, timeless even.
Yeah, exactly. It feels untouched.
You drop a line in the water, and I don't know, you feel like you're participating in this ancient, unbroken ritual.
We really like to think of rivers as these pristine boundaries, like they separate the human world from the wild.
It is a really comforting image,
Yeah.
but when you look closely at the realities of aquatic biology and, human history and modern food systems, that shimmering surface completely shatters.
What shatters? How so?
Well, that river you're looking at, it's likely functioning way more like a submerged piece of human infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is this highly managed, engineered landscape that's basically just wearing a wild disguise. That is wow. Okay, and that brings us right to the core of what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We have this massive stack of research, historical records, biological data, and it's all centered on two incredibly iconic freshwater fish.
Two very different fish, I should add.
Exactly. The trout and the catfish. Because if you put them side by side, you see two entirely different visions of freshwater life.
You really do.
One is this like cold water aristocrat,
Yeah.
a symbol of purity and fragility, and the other is this warm water survivor, just built for adaptability and resilience.
Right. And our mission today is to trace how humans moved from living alongside these specific fish in, seasonal local ecosystems to managing them as agricultural products in these massive controlled food systems.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at the sources and I'm just wondering, how is it that two animals sharing the label freshwater fish can live in completely different sensory worlds? And
Right.
beyond that, raise completely different moral and economic questions for us.
It's a great question. And to understand how these two specific animals ended up anchoring modern industrial seafood supply chains, we really have to look at the vastly different underwater worlds they evolved to conquer.
So we're starting way back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this isn't just a biology lesson. It's a systems analysis of human civilization. But it definitely begins with evolutionary biology.
Right.
Now, we do need to clarify right off the bat that trout and catfish are extremely broad, common names, like huge categories.
Yeah, the sources mention tons of species, but we're zeroing in on two, right?
Exactly. Our focus today is on the rainbow trout, which is a salmonid with the scientific name Oncorhynchus mykiss, and then the channel catfish Ictularis punctatus, which belongs to the order Siluriformes.
Okay, so we got our two main characters, and their origins are separated by just immense stretches of geological time, aren't they?
Completely. The catfish lineage is incredibly ancient. The fossil and phylogenetic evidence places definitive catfish deep in the Cretaceous period.
Like dinosaur times.
Literally dinosaur times. They have roots connected to ancient southern land masses, evolving in a world that was significantly warmer.
But the trout is totally different.
Right. The salmonid family, which includes our rainbow trout, is evolutionarily much younger. They emerged in the northern hemisphere and were just profoundly shaped by the dynamic, cold, glaciated environments of the Pleistocene.
So ice ages.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the environments that shaped them completely dictated their anatomy. The trout lineage basically placed its evolutionary bet on high performance in a very narrow, highly specific habitat.
They're built for absolute precision.
Yes. If you look at a rainbow trout, it has this perfectly streamlined, torpedo-shaped body. That morphology is dictated entirely by fluid dynamics.
So because they have to swim against fast, continuous currents,
Yeah.
right? Like all day long.
Right, and they have to do it without exhausting themselves.
But swimming against a fast current like that requires massive amounts of energy, which means they need a ton of oxygen.
A huge amount. They require incredibly high levels of dissolved oxygen. And, the physics of water dictate that cold water can hold significantly more dissolved oxygen than warm water.
Oh, right. So they're physically trapped by the temperature.
Exactly. Because trout have such high metabolic demands, they are biologically tethered to cold mountain streams or, deep, cool lakes.
And they hunt by sight, don't they?
They do. They are vision-based predators. They evolved in environments where glacial meltwater or spring water is just crystal clear.
So they're literally engineered for clear, open highways, just darting out from behind rocks to catch insects and smaller clay drifting in the current.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, but then we look at the catfish. And they placed a completely different evolutionary bet
A totally opposite bet.
because they're built to survive in warm, slow, turbid, or, just muddy waters.
Oh.
But I have to push back on something here because people always use bottom feeder as an insult for catfish.
Oh, constantly.
Right, like it implies this lack of sophistication. But looking at the anatomy in these papers, a catfish is built like a rugged, all-terrain rover covered in high-tech sensors.
I love that analogy because that stereotype of the lazy bottom feeder just completely misunderstands their biology. A channel catfish is essentially a highly advanced sensory apparatus.
Okay, explain that.
Well, because they evolved in warm, slow-moving water, visibility is often near zero, right? You've got mud, silt, algae blocking the light.
So if you rely on your eyes in that environment,
You starve.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So the catfish evolved to read muddy water with its skin.
wait, really? I'm having a hard time picturing how a fish actually tastes with its skin. Is it physically identical to a human tongue?
Functionally, yes. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service data details how channel catfish have taste buds distributed across their entire external body.
That is wild.
Yeah, they are heavily concentrated around their gills and, most famously, on their barbels. You know, those whisker-like appendages on their face.
The catfish whiskers, yeah.
Right. Now, think about this. A human has roughly 10,000 taste buds, and they're all confined to our mouth.
Okay.
A moderately sized catfish can have upward of 175,000 taste buds all over its body.
175,000.
Yeah.
So they are essentially just swimming in a giant cloud of chemical data.
That's exactly what they're doing. They map their environment chemically and tactilely. They can detect a single drop of a specific amino acid in millions of gallons of water.
That is mind-blowing.
It is. So when they drag those barbels along the river bottom, they are literally reading the chemical signature of buried prey or decaying matter or even shifts in water chemistry. They don't need to see you to know you're there.
It's like sonar, but for taste.
Basically. And they also evolve this tough, scaleless skin and sharp dorsal and pectoral spines that can actually lock into place.
Why do they need locking spines?
Well, if you live in an environment where visibility is zero, you are going to bump into predators. Those locking spines prevent a larger fish or a bird from swallowing them whole.
It makes complete sense. Okay, so we have the vision-dependent, high-metabolism predator of the cold currents, and then we have the chemically sensing, armored survivor of the warm mud.
Precisely.
And because they evolved in these opposite sensory worlds, their strategies for creating the next generation, their whole life cycle is entirely different.
Right, which becomes incredibly crucial later when we talk about how humans eventually learned to farm them.
Okay, let's look at the trout first. The sources say female trout build nests called redds in the gravel of cold flowing streams.
Yes, the red is just a fascinating piece of natural engineering. The female uses her tail to excavate this depression in the gravel, but she does it specifically in areas where water flows downward through the stones.
Why does the water need to flow downward?
That flow is critical. Once she deposits the eggs and the male fertilizes them externally, they just abandon the nest.
Just leave.
They just leave. There is zero parental care. They are relying on the flowing water to do the work of the parrots.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it constantly bathes the eggs in highly oxygenated water and physically flushes away metabolic waste like ammonia.
So they rely completely on the pristine quality of the environment itself to act as the nursery. It's a trust the river strategy.
Exactly. But there is also this biological flexibility built into the rainbow trout that seems almost contradictory when you first look at it.
Right, the steelhead thing.
Yes. The sources outline how some rainbow trout remain in freshwater their entire lives. But steelhead, which are the exact same species, Oncorhynchus mykiss, they migrate out to the ocean.
Same exact fish.
Same exact fish. They grow massive in the saltwater, and then they navigate back up the exact same freshwater streams to spawn.
That's incredible. How do they survive the salt?
It's a phenomenon known as anadromy, and it requires this staggering physiological transformation called smoltification. The fish's kidneys and gills completely alter how they handle salt.
Like rebuilding their own engines while they're swimming.
Pretty much. It's an evolutionary hedge against unstable environments. If a local river system can't support a large population, some individuals can tap into the immense caloric wealth of the ocean, returning only to use those sterile gravel beds for reproduction.
But regardless of whether it is a resident rainbow trout or an ocean-going steelhead, the reproductive strategy still relies on that perfect oxygenated gravel bed.
Always.
Okay, now contrast that with the channel catfish. The sources say they spawn in the warmer months, and instead of open gravel, they seek out protected cavities.
Right. We are talking undercut banks, hollow logs, sometimes even submerged debris or like muskrat burrows.
And the female lays this gelatinous mass of eggs, but then the male takes over.
This is a totally different strategy. The male channel catfish fiercely guards the nest. He will attack anything that comes near the cavity.
A dedicated dad.
Very dedicated. And beyond just defense, he uses his fins to constantly fan the egg mass.
Why fan them?
Well, remember, in warm water, oxygen levels can plummet really fast, and that gelatinous mass can easily suffocate or succumb to fungal infections. So the male's fanning physically forces water through the mass, oxygenating it and keeping it clean.
Wow.
And even after the eggs hatch into this tight little school of fry, he stays with them for a period, guarding them until they're ready to disperse.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. If trout just abandoned thousands of eggs in the gravel without any protection, how did they become such a dominant species before humans intervened?
It's a fair question.
Like, it seems like a terrible strategy compared to the fiercely protective catfish dad.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it's a classic example of evolutionary trade-offs. Biologists often frame this as a spectrum between quantity and parental investment.
Okay, so trout are playing the quantity game.
Exactly. Trout produce a massive number of eggs, playing a numbers game. As long as the physical environment remains pristine, the environment does all the heavy lifting of keeping the eggs alive.
And the catfish.
The catfish invests heavily in fewer offspring because its environment is crowded with predators and highly prone to oxygen crashes. But, and this is the key, these reproductive styles directly dictate their vulnerability in the modern world.
Because trout rely on the river as a nursery, they are highly vulnerable to environmental shifts.
Extremely vulnerable.
Like if the water warms up due to climate change, the oxygen drops and the eggs die. Or if a logging operation upstream dumps silt into the river.
Right. The silt clogs the spaces between the gravel, it blocks the water flow, and that entire generation of trout just suffocates. The environment fails them.
Conversely, catfish eggs hidden in a warm water cavity are way less vulnerable to sudden cold water oxygen crashes or siltation.
Right. But they are highly vulnerable to the dense populations of predators in that warm ecosystem, which is why that evolutionary necessity of the male guard developed.
Okay, so once you understand how these fish live, how their bodies are engineered, and how they reproduce, you really start to understand how human technology evolved to outsmart them.
You do. And the archaeological evidence for the human harvest of aquatic life is just staggering.
Yeah, the sources mention northern Kenya.
Right. In northern Kenya, there are butchered aquatic animal remains, including catfish, that date back nearly 2 million years.
2 million years.
Yes. Early hominins were utilizing them long before anatomically modern humans even existed.
That's almost impossible to wrap your head around. And then, moving closer to our era, researchers found shellfish hooks in Timor-Leste dating back 23,000 years.
And there are Natufian bone hooks in the Levant from the early Holocene. Early humans were highly, highly sophisticated when it came to understanding the behavior of fish.
But for a very long time, this fishing was like intimate and seasonal, right?
Very intimate. Indigenous communities across Western North America harvested trout and steelhead during their massive seasonal runs. They didn't just cast lines randomly.
No, the sources talk about how they engineered these complex weirs, used specialized spears, and timed their harvest to the specific hydrological cycles of the rivers.
Exactly. And a weir is a stationary enclosure built across a stream, designed to direct the flow of migrating fish into a trap.
That sounds like it takes a lot of knowledge.
It requires an incredible, intimate understanding of exactly when the fish will move, the volume of the water, the topography of the riverbed.
And early fishers targeting catfish were just as knowledgeable. They used baited hooks, basket traps, and night fishing techniques.
Right, because they were actively exploiting the catfish's biology. They knew that a catfish relies on scent and taste, so they used pungent bait and trapped them in the dark, murky waters where the catfish felt secure.
So imagine being one of those traditional fishers for a second. You intimately know the moon phases, the water levels, the fish behavior. It's a real relationship based on local limits. You had to know the water.
You had to be a part of the ecosystem, essentially.
But then the sources outline this specific technological trajectory that completely altered this relationship. It goes body to tool, tool to boat, boat to storage, storage to machine, and machine to data.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, That progression represents the gradual distancing of the human from the immediate ecosystem.
A bone hook is a tool that extends the body.
A small boat extends your reach. But the real inflection point, the massive shift, was the transition to industrial machinery and storage.
The steam-powered trawlers at the turn of the 20th century.
Exactly. Suddenly, boats were no longer limited by wind or human muscle. They could drag massive nets through the water relentlessly.
Did that technology just completely sever that intimate relationship we had with the river?
Well, the danger wasn't the hook or the net itself. The danger was when technology broke the limit between human appetite and local ecosystem capacity.
And pulling the fish out of the water is only half the battle. The sources highlight refrigeration as this massive, silent revolution.
Oh, refrigeration completely changed the fundamental geography of human eating.
Because before mechanical refrigeration, fish had to be consumed almost immediately, right?
Yeah.
Or preserved through heavy salting, smoking, or drying.
Right. The harvest was strictly tethered to the local season and the local population. But the invention of ammonia-based compression systems for early 20th century fishing fleets meant that boats could stay out for months.
So you just detach the harvest from the local season completely.
Exactly. A fish caught in the Pacific Northwest could be frozen and sold in a grocery store in the Midwest half a year later.
And then you add modern technology to that. We introduced sonar, originally developed for submarine warfare, to locate schools of fish underwater.
And we use GPS to mark the exact coordinates of where they gather to spawn.
So the uncertainty is completely removed from the equation.
And uncertainty is the primary mechanism that allows wild fish populations to survive human predation.
Because if we don't know exactly where they are, some survive to reproduce.
Right. When you combine sonar, GPS, and massive refrigerated holds, you replace uncertainty with industrial extraction. Wild fish were turned into mere inventory.
The paradigm shifted from asking, what can this river provide today, to what can the global market absorb this quarter?
Exactly. And because the global market can absorb seemingly endless amounts of protein, and wild ecosystems simply cannot regenerate fast enough to meet that demand, humanity was forced to cross a massive planetary threshold.
We didn't just overfish, we shifted our entire strategy. We stopped hunting fish and we started farming them.
The scale of this shift cannot be overstated. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, the year 2022 marked a major milestone.
What happened in 2022?
For the first time in human history, global aquaculture surpassed wild capture. Humanity produced 94.4 million tons of farmed aquatic animals.
94.4 million tons.
Yes. That accounts for 51% of the world's total aquatic animal production.
That is just a fundamental redesign of the planet's biosphere.
Yeah.
We now farm more aquatic animals than we catch.
We do.
But okay, let's unpack this. Farming plants is like managing real estate. You plant a seed in the soil, water it, and wait. But taking that logic of terrestrial agriculture and applying it to water seems incredibly complicated.
It is arguably the most complex form of agriculture we have ever attempted.
Why is it so different?
Well, when you farm land, the crop is rooted. When you farm fish, you are managing a highly mobile animal inside an unstable chemical environment. The farmer isn't just delivering calories to the fish. The farmer is responsible for managing the nitrogen cycle within a closed system.
I understand that fish produce waste, obviously. But why is the nitrogen cycle the critical factor in aquaculture?
Okay, so when fish consume feed, they excrete ammonia across their gills and in their feces.
Across their gills?
Yes. In a natural wild river, that ammonia is immediately diluted by millions of gallons of flowing water. But in a concentrated farm setting, that ammonia builds up incredibly rapidly.
And ammonia is bad news.
It is highly toxic to fish. It literally burns their gills and prevents their blood from carrying oxygen.
Oh, wow. So how do they survive on a farm?
In aquaculture, farmers have to actively cultivate specific strains of nitrifying bacteria. These bacteria convert that toxic ammonia into nitrites and then into relatively harmless nitrates.
So farming fish sounds like you're trying to manage a space station's life support system while the astronauts are constantly polluting the air.
That is a very accurate analogy. The farmer is constantly balancing dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, and this invisible bacterial cycle. And it all happens within the exact same medium the animal uses to breathe.
And this brings us back to the biology we talked about earlier. The trout's need for cold, fast water versus the catfish's adaptability to warm, still water. Those traits dictate exactly how we engineer these farms, right?
Absolutely. Aquaculture is humanity's attempt to force animal agriculture logic into water. And because trout evolved for fast, oxygen-rich rivers, Farming them requires building artificial rivers.
The sources call them raceways.
Yes, raceways. These are long, concrete channels with a continuous, massive flow of cold water rushing through them.
It's essentially a water quality machine.
Exactly. The flowing water naturally oxygenates the system and constantly flushes the ammonia out. Trout are farmed because they have excellent feed conversion ratios, meaning they turn a pound of feed into a pound of flesh very efficiently, and they tolerate being handled in crowded conditions.
But the water parameters are non-negotiable.
Completely non-negotiable. The optimum water temperature for rainbow trout culture is strictly below 21 degrees Celsius. If the temperature spikes, or if a pump fails and the flow stops,
The oxygen just completely drops.
and the entire crop can die in minutes.
That sounds incredibly stressful to manage. Now, the catfish presents a completely different farming model. Because they evolved for warm, murky, lower oxygen environments, they don't need concrete raceways,
No, catfish farming is heavily rooted in the U.S. South, particularly in the Mississippi Delta. They are farmed in massive, shallow, earthen ponds.
which leverages their evolutionary resilience. But the sources say it introduces its own profound challenges.
It really does. Remember, warm water naturally holds less dissolved oxygen than cold water. In a densely stocked catfish pond, the water is thick with microscopic algae.
Okay.
During the day, that algae undergoes photosynthesis, producing oxygen. But at night, the process reverses.
Reverses. How?
The algae stop producing oxygen and actually begin consuming it through respiration.
Wait, really? So the plants in the pond actually compete with the fish for oxygen in the dark?
Precisely. In the pre-dawn hours, a heavily stocked catfish pond can experience catastrophic oxygen crashes.
So what does the farmer do?
They monitor the dissolved oxygen levels constantly. When the levels dip dangerously low, they deploy massive mechanical aerators.
Like giant fans.
Essentially giant paddle wheels driven by tractor engines. They violently churn the surface of the pond, forcing atmospheric oxygen into the water to keep the fish alive until the sun comes up.
That is just intense.
Yeah.
But it's true, we're forcing terrestrial agricultural logic onto an aquatic system.
We are.
Okay, so the fish is farmed, or caught. But the moment a farmed or wild fish is pulled from that water, another invisible biological clock starts ticking.
Yes, the spoilage clock.
Right. And how humans fought that biological countdown over centuries created the foundations of our culinary history.
It's fascinating because fish flesh is uniquely perishable. It spoils far faster than the meat of terrestrial animals like beef or poultry.
Why is that? The sources detail several physiological reasons. First, fish muscle has a very high moisture content.
Right, which is an ideal environment for bacterial growth. Second, their flesh is rich in highly active enzymes designed to function in cold environments.
So when the fish dies,
These enzymes immediately begin breaking down the tissue, leading to a mushy texture.
and then there's the issue with the fats in the fish.
Yes, fish contain high levels of polyunsaturated fats. These fats remain fluid at cold temperatures, which is what allows the fish to swim in frigid water.
But there's a downside once they're out of the water.
A big one. Polyunsaturated fats oxidize incredibly quickly when exposed to air. They turn rancid and produce that sharp, unpleasant, fishy odor.
Nobody likes that smell. And there's also the issue of the bacteria naturally present on the fish. Because these fish live in cold or cool water, the bacteria on their skin and in their digestive tracts are psychrophilic.
Meaning they're adapted to thrive in cold environments.
Right. So if you put a chicken in a refrigerator, the cold temperatures drastically slow down the bacteria. But if you put a trout in a refrigerator,
Those cold-adapted bacteria just continue to multiply. The FDA warns of rapid bacterial growth anytime the fish is in the danger zone between 40 degrees and 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
so long before freezing technology existed, preservation was literally a daily battle for survival.
Civilization fighting time.
Exactly. We used smoke, salt, and dehydration. And these were not culinary inventions designed by chefs seeking flavor, right? They were necessary technologies to prevent starvation.
Exactly. Smoking dries the exterior of the flesh and permeates it with formaldehyde and phenolic compounds from the wood, which act as powerful antimicrobials.
And salting alters the osmotic pressure. It physically draws the moisture out of the bacterial cells, preventing them from reproducing.
But over generations, those desperate survival methods became beloved cultural flavor profiles.
And this is where the culinary paths of trout and catfish violently diverge.
Yeah.
Because of its biology, trout flesh is delicate, flaky, and mild. It lacks heavy connective tissue.
So it leans heavily toward culinary refinement and minimalism. The culinary logic applied to trout is one of restraint.
Right, the sources mention dishes like trout almondine, which has French Creole origins in New Orleans, or the classic French trout meuniere.
The preparation involves a light dredging of flour, a quick sauté in brown butter, a squeeze of lemon, and perhaps some parsley.
Because if you introduce heavy spices or deep fry it in a thick batter, you completely obliterate the delicate texture and subtle flavor of the fish.
Exactly. Even the preservation of trout, like cold smoking, is treated as a refined, high-end culinary process.
Okay, but catfish requires a completely different approach. The flesh is firmer, it has a more robust, slightly earthy flavor due to its environment, and it can withstand intense heat.
Its culinary history is deeply rooted in communal, highly seasoned comfort food.
The most iconic preparation being southern fried catfish, dredged in a thick, highly seasoned cornmeal crust and deep fried at high temperatures, often served with hush puppies and hot sauce.
The firm structure of the catfish holds up perfectly to the aggressive heat of deep frying, and the cornmeal provides a textural contrast to the dense meat.
And we see similar robust treatments globally, don't we?
We do. In Vietnam, there is a traditional dish called co tu. Catfish steaks are slow braised in a clay pot with a powerful reduction of fish sauce, caramelized sugar, garlic, and chilies.
Oh, that sounds amazing. But a delicate trout would just disintegrate in that preparation.
It would turn to mush. But the catfish absorbs the intense flavors while maintaining its structural integrity.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, when you sit down at a restaurant? Is it fair to say that trout gets the fine dining treatment and catfish gets the comfort food treatment entirely because of their biology?
I think it's a synthesis of biology and culture. The trout's biology demands a gentle touch, coding it culturally as refined. The catfish's dense, survival-driven body makes it a canvas for robust, heavy seasoning, coding it as comfort food.
And that culinary divide directly shapes the massive economic and environmental supply chains that bring these fish to our tables.
Let's map that out economically. Trout is positioned globally as a premium specialty fish.
It is deeply intertwined with recreational tourism.
Deeply. The wild trout economy supports a vast infrastructure of fly fishing lodges, specialized guides, high-end gear manufacturers, and conservation organizations.
And in the retail sector.
Farmed trout is sold as a premium, fresh, or frozen fillet, often marketed alongside Atlantic salmon to affluent consumers.
But catfish operates on a completely different economic scale.
Completely different. It is a high-volume, affordable protein. The domestic economy of catfish is heavily concentrated in the massive pond infrastructure of the Mississippi Delta.
Which supports rural processing plants and regional feed mills.
Right. However, globally, this market faces intense pressure from imported catfish-like species, particularly Pangasius or sway.
Where do those come from?
They are farmed in immense volumes in the Mekong Delta of Southeast Asia.
And the environmental impact scale alongside those economic models. The threats to wild trout are basically existential at this point.
Because they require cold, highly oxygenated water, they are on the front lines of climate change. Warming streams literally shrink their habitable zones.
Furthermore, hydroelectric dams block their migration routes, and the fragmentation of river networks prevents isolated populations from mixing genetics.
And for farm trout, the environmental concerns center on the effluent, the concentrated nitrogen and phosphorus discharged from the raceways into local waterways, and the ecological risks of domesticated farmed trout escaping.
Because if they breed with wild populations, it dilutes the wild genetics.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the environmental footprint of catfish farming is tied to land use and water management. Converting thousands of acres into shallow earthen ponds alters the local hydrology.
And that nutrient-dense water must be carefully managed to prevent toxic algae blooms in surrounding watersheds when the ponds are drained.
But there is also a wild environmental crisis involving catfish. The sources highlight that in estuaries like the Chesapeake Bay, introduced blue and flathead catfish have become invasive apex predators.
Yes, in the Chesapeake Bay, these large catfish species were introduced decades ago for recreational fishing.
Just for sport.
Just for sport. But because they are highly adaptable, breed prolifically, and have incredibly broad diets, their populations just exploded.
What are they eating?
Everything. They are fundamentally altering the food web, consuming massive quantities of native blue crabs, yellow perch, and striped bass.
It is a prime example of human intervention destabilizing an ecosystem for short-term recreational gain.
It really is.
And this brings us to a crucial part of the deep dive. The ethics of industrializing aquatic life. It's so easy to look at a neatly packaged, skinless white fillet in the frozen aisle of a grocery store and forget that it was a living, breathing animal.
Very easy.
Because fish don't blink or scream like mammals, do we just give ourselves a moral free pass to industrialize them?
This raises an important question about how invisibility reduces empathy. The moral invisibility of fish is a profound psychological and cultural phenomenon.
We readily empathize with cows, pigs, and chickens because we share mammalian or avian traits. They vocalize distress, they have expressive eyes, they interact in ways we recognize.
But fish exist in an alien environment. They do not vocalize in a register we hear, and their facial structures lack the muscles for expressions we code as suffering.
And historically, this biological distance has given industrial agriculture a moral blank check regarding their treatment.
Yes, but the scientific consensus in these sources is actively challenging that perspective. There is a major review published in Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society B that directly addresses fish sentience.
What did they find? Do they actually feel pain?
The review systematically evaluates the neurobiological and behavioral evidence. It confirms that fish satisfy rigorous scientific criteria for sentience.
How so?
Well, they possess nociceptors, which are specialized sensory receptors that detect damaging stimuli.
Right.
And they demonstrate complex cognitive flexibility, spatial mapping, and social learning. The researchers conclude that while a fish's experience of pain may not be neurologically identical to a mammal's, the evidence strongly suggests they possess the capacity for subjective suffering and emotion-like states.
Which introduces significant ethical tension when we look at the mechanics of aquaculture. We are holding sentient creatures in severely crowded ponds or concrete raceways.
Right. The chronic stress of poor water quality, the handling procedures, and the slaughter methods employed in high-volume processing plants are often optimized for speed and economic efficiency, not necessarily animal welfare.
And the ethical considerations extend beyond the fish to the human laborers within the supply chain, too.
Absolutely. The industrial seafood system relies heavily on marginalized labor. The workers in the rural processing plants, filleting, freezing, and packaging the high-volume catfish or imported pangasius are often vulnerable populations or migrant laborers working under grueling conditions for low wages.
Additionally, there is the ongoing struggle of indigenous communities whose treaty rights and cultural survival are inextricably linked to the traditional harvest of wild salmonids.
The construction of dams and the pollution from agricultural runoff frequently threaten those ancient runs, effectively erasing their access to the river.
The sources suggest a framework for evaluating this. A responsible seafood system must nourish the human population without systematically erasing the welfare of the animal, the dignity of the worker, or the ecological integrity of the river.
It's a tall order, but it's essential. All of these interconnected layers, the evolutionary biology, the chemistry of aquaculture, the thermodynamics of preservation, the economics of global trade, and the ethics of extraction, they culminate in how these two fish reside within the human imagination.
Because civilization does not merely consume nature, it categorizes it and turns it into symbols.
Exactly. Let's examine that symbolism, starting with the trout.
The trout represents purity, escape, and untamed wilderness. It is woven into ancient Celtic folklore. There are legends of the white trout residing in enchanted, pristine pools, representing spirits that cannot be corrupted.
And in modern times, it is the centerpiece of elite fly fishing literature.
Right. Catching a wild trout on a hand-tied dry fly is framed as the ultimate test of a human's intellectual connection to nature.
The trout serves as our cultural proxy for pristine nature. However, there's a glaring paradox in modern conservation.
What's the paradox?
Millions of the trout that anglers catch every year, those supposed symbols of wildness, are entirely manufactured.
Manufactured, like hatched in a lab.
They are bred in concrete hatcheries, raised on formulated pellet feed, and transported across states in aerated tanker trucks, only to be dumped into rivers specifically to provide recreational sport.
Wow. So it is a highly managed, domesticated experience masquerading as an encounter with the wild.
Yes. We project our desire for an untainted world onto the trout, even when we have engineered the entire interaction.
It feels like we're not even looking at the fish anymore. Are we just looking at a mirror? Trout is our desire for a perfect, untainted world, and catfish is our gritty reality.
I agree completely. The catfish carries a totally different symbolic weight. It represents grit, survival, and the hidden, often overlooked depths of society.
The folklore surrounding the catfish is incredibly rich. In ancient Egypt, catfish were depicted in tomb reliefs and viewed as protectors in the watery underworld.
Likely because they could navigate the dark, anaerobic mud of the Nile where other fish would perish.
In Japanese folklore, the symbolism is tied to immense, uncontrollable natural forces. The namazu is a giant mythical catfish that slumbers beneath the mud of the earth.
And when it thrashes its tail, it causes devastating earthquakes. It was simultaneously feared as a harbinger of destruction and sometimes revered as a force of cosmic realignment that punished greed.
That's fascinating. And in modern American culture, the catfish symbolizes Southern identity, agricultural resilience, and working-class hospitality. It's the communal centerpiece of the rural fish fry.
And in recent years, the word has been co-opted into the digital realm.
Oh, right, catfishing.
Yes. It's now universally understood as the act of adopting a hidden, deceptive identity on the internet. Someone lurking in the murky, anonymous waters of social media, pretending to be something they are not.
It is remarkable linguistic evolution that perfectly mirrors the fish's biology. The catfish navigates the unseen, the turbid, and the hidden.
We truly use these animals as a mirror for our own societal values. Civilization doesn't just eat nature, it categorizes it.
Trout teaches us that purity is fragile, while catfish teaches us that survival and abundance are often muddy.
We romanticize the cold water aristocrat and often underestimate the warm water survivor. But both narratives are essential for understanding our contradictory relationship with the natural world.
We began this exploration by looking at the biology of a streamlined salmonid fighting against glacial meltwater, and a whiskered bottom dweller mapping the warm mud with chemical sensors.
Two very different beginnings.
But by tracing the biological realities of those two bodies, we unpacked the entire trajectory of human technological escalation. The complex chemistry of global aquaculture, the divergent culinary paths of fine dining versus comfort food, and the heavy ethical framework of feeding billions of people.
It is a massive amount of interconnected systems to process.
It really is. Thank you so much for coming along on this deep dive with us today.
Yes, thank you for listening. And if there's one lingering concept to take away and consider deeply, it is the reality of the threshold we have recently crossed.
The 2022 FAO data.
Exactly. Think about the fact that humanity has officially surpassed the point where we farm more aquatic life than we catch in the wild. The era of the wild harvest is no longer the dominant paradigm.
So the next time you are standing on the bank of a river or looking out over a massive reservoir, or even just deciding what fillet to order from a restaurant menu, look past the shimmering surface.
Ask yourself the question.
Are you engaging with the remnants of an ancient wild ecosystem? Or are you actually looking at the submerged, highly engineered infrastructure of a newly domesticated planet?